We now return to part 2 of our conversation with Keep Our Republic.
What types of cases come in front of the federal circuit? Because most non-lawyers had not heard about the federal circuit court until it decided the tariff case, which puts you in a very unique position.
That is funny, because having been on the district court for 16 years where I decided all kinds of cases, then I moved to the federal circuit, and I had friends who were lawyers who even said, "What's that? What do they do?" Lawyers then tend to think that federal circuit is just intellectual property law. That's just one piece of their jurisdiction. They have a much broader jurisdiction than that, but they don't do any criminal cases. They don't do just basic diversity actions between parties from different states, but they have a range that includes intellectual property law, includes tax, includes veterans law, takings cases. There's a huge broad range, but international trade is one of the big things that they do. So that's how these cases landed in one of their lower courts and went up to them because of the international trade jurisdiction.
Now, and I don't want to get too case specific about the decision, but those litigants, be the Costco or whomever, will be asking for tariff money back. Where will those cases be litigated?
Those would likely go to the Court of Claims, and which is also, whose decisions are also appealable to the federal circuit.
Yeah.
But that's where they most likely will end up. The Federal Court of Claims, which is also in DC.
Justice Brady, I want to change gears and talk to you a moment about what was, without giving specifics, the most controversial decision or the most controversial case that you handled when you were sitting in Virginia. You're sitting in Virginia federal court, or was it the FISA court?
Well, of course, I can't talk about what I did on the FISA court. You get me in trouble.
Yes, and I do not. I even apologize for suggesting that you talk about the FISA court. The last thing I need is a DOJ issuing a arrest warrant for me.
Right. I've had several interesting. I had a case which is still in the court system. A couple of cases still in the court system, but one from the Biden administration, regulation which precluded immigration judges from speaking if they did not have permission from Department of Justice, and which prevented them from just going out and speaking at Chamber of Commerce or whoever wanted to hear from them without first getting permission. And the Immigration Judges Association sued, saying that was a First Amendment restraint that was unlawful. And I found that it was a minimally invasive to the First Amendment, and that there was a recourse in the courts if the judge felt he had the right to go out and speak on a certain topic. And that's still winding its way through the courts. It's an interesting decision. And of course, another one was Sony v. Cox, which was the largest copyright case brought by the music industry against the Cox service provider on music being unlawfully downloaded. And that was just argued not long ago. So a lot cases where you've got no real law, and you really have to piece together different laws to try and come up with the right decision. And those are the ones that, the Court of Appeals rightly spends a lot of time looking at, and the Supreme Court does as well. And and you hope you get it right at the district court level, and you're grateful that there's a Court of Appeals and a Supreme Court that's going to tell you whether you were right or not, because it's all about getting it right.
Yeah, well, that was a good tee up for where I wanted to go with you, Judge O'Malley, dealing with the issue of the rule of law and how we often talk about the rule of law. And because what you dealt with in the Federal Circuit Court and it being mostly a business litigation, how does the rule of law play out in the business world and consistency of the rule of law? So that I need people to understand that we think about that generally with what's happening in America right now and with the president, but there are other economic factors with the rule of law. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's really important because there are times when there may be a plaintiff who is very sympathetic, even in a pure business case. But by adhering to the rule of law, you actually are able to create predictability for the entire economic environment, so that businesses know how they're going to operate and within what bounds they can operate. Other countries know within what bounds we are going to operate. And it's really important that you try to maintain that consistency and that principled truth. And you don't always get it right, and you don't always like what you're doing. I can tell you there were many times where I had to issue decisions that I personally would not have agreed with, but because I was bound by the law, I had to do it. And it's still the right way to do it because, as I said, it protects us all in the long run if we adhere to the rule of law.
Now, Judge O'Grady, you're former assistant United States attorney. What do you see going on at the United States Attorney's Office or the Attorney General's office, if anything, that's concerning you nowadays?
At the Department of Justice level?
Yes.
Okay. I'm from the Eastern District of Virginia, where there's been a whole lot going on recently. But at the Department of Justice, you have a new administration. They are doing things very differently. You don't have, Merrick Garland, when he had an issue that he thought should go outside the department, he would appoint an independent lawyer and Jack Smith or another, and of course President Biden did the same thing. President Obama did the same thing, and get it out of the Department of Justice to an independent reviewer. This Department of Justice has internalized investigations. They have the shootings in Minnesota are the classic or the most recent examples, and there they, traditionally the Department of Justice would have brought its own expertise into the investigation, but they would have worked with the state and local authorities in the investigation and then examined whether federal laws had been broken.
Well, I'm going to borrow from Donald Trump, and I'm going to say people are saying, and you can count me as one of those people are saying.
Yeah.
He never identifies who the people are, but people are saying that the Justice Department has become his own attack group, and it's lost its independence. And I see maybe Judge O'Malley, maybe one of those people are saying people too by your head shake. Because I love when Trump says people are saying, and he never identifies. So I can say I'm one of those people who believe that the Justice Department is being politicized and used as Trump's own personal vendetta machine. And I'm concerned about that. What do you think of that, Judge O'Malley?
I think there is a huge concern because one of the reasons that the system has always worked so well is that judges could at least, even if you don't always agree with what the U.S. attorneys are saying or the Justice Department is doing, you could trust them to stay within certain limits and bounds and to understand that there was basically a hard line against basing their decisions on politics rather than the law. There were times that when I was on the district court where I had to say to the more senior people at the U.S. Attorney's Office, are you guys sure that you're not just, don't just have a vendetta against this particular public official or this particular defendant? And, and they would always either reassure me that they had and explain why they had walked through the analysis the way they did, or they would talk to the particular U.S. attorney and perhaps things would ratchet down a little bit and the temperature would go down. That is not happening. In fact, the senior people are the ones who are raising the temperature, and it means that the whole judiciary, which I include the Justice Department as well as the Public Defender's Office, it's all a team, and it's not going to be operating properly under that measure.
Now, Judge O'Grady, and by all means, you don't have to agree with me, but I'll just say when they start, and when I say they, the administration started telling us, don't believe your eyes, believe my lying lips, when we see things like what happened in Minnesota. What does that do to the Justice Department, the judiciary, and all aspects of the government?
Well, the public has a right to expect that there's clarity in what is being said by their law enforcement and their judiciary, that there's candor.
But Judge O'Grady, but here's where it drives me crazy. On, let's say, random Monday, Trump bashes a particular politician. On Wednesday, she's indicted. What does that do to the Justice Department and the judiciary when something like that happens?
Well, it further erodes the trust that the public has in the independence of the Department of Justice, and that they are not pursuing criminal offenses against our citizens for political reasons.
Is there some type of mechanism available to judges when they see these types of indictments that are brought with no evidence or scant evidence, and it seems to be more based upon a public comment that Trump may have made about someone he doesn't like? And we see these. Is there where does what's the judiciary's role in this? I see some grand juries will not indict, but what's the judiciary's role?
Well, the grand jury is critical, and the old adage that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich is not true. And they're watching what's going on. They're looking at the political environment and trying to ferret out what's coming before them for political reasons or because of laws that have been broken. So they're an excellent barrier, and as you said, there's been serious pushback recently in those. There's also the vindictive prosecution that the former Attorney General Comey, his case before Judge Curry dismissed it because the U.S. attorney hadn't been validly placed in position, and she had done the grand jury work and also signed the indictment.
But that was it. What upset me about, well, it was a good thing that Comey was not indicted,
right,
on the basis he was indicted, but it seems to me, and I'm going to take my lawyer hat off for just a moment, that when something like that does come before the bench and before a judge, it seems to be incumbent upon the judge, because you guys can only speak through your opinions. You can't
Right.
come out and have a news conference where you call the president treasonous and call him out by name, but you can in your opinions issue. Do you think judges ought to be calling out the Justice Department when they do things like this? I mean, Judge O'Malley, what's your thought on that?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
judges are conservative, and I don't mean in a political sense. I mean in
Yes.
terms of their approach to their jobs and their approach to the law. So most judges are not going to say that I'm going to reach a decision that's not really before me and dismiss a case without a motion to dismiss being presented to them. Having said that, there are judges who will say, I think, look at the defense counsel and say, I think that this might merit a motion for vindictive prosecution. And as you're seeing lately, there are certainly judges who are willing to say in very
Because
hard.
we're in unprecedented times, Judge O'Malley, and what the rules were before, and I don't think apply, because here you have a whole branch of the government remaining silent and being attacked. And the only way you can speak is to speak through these opinions. I'm looking forward to an opinion from a judge says this case represents the Department of Justice being rogue.
There have been a few of those decisions in writing made in response to motions that are really presented. But remember, you don't want to basically drop to the level of someone you think someone's behaving inappropriately, and so then you tend to drop to their level and do the same thing. The judges really have to try to take the high road, and they don't have to be silent. They can say very tough things in their opinions, but they can't go outside of their opinions, and they should not reach to decide issues that aren't presented to them, as much as they would like to, and as much as you would think that that might be called for.
Mm-hmm.
My brother gave me a sweatshirt that said I miss precedented times. I mean, it's really true. But it worries me that, and that's why we have the Article 3 coalition. That's why we have organizations like you, is that to prevent the judges from being tempted to step outside their role just because the president is stepping outside of his. And so I think what's the way it's playing out is maybe not as fast and as furious as some of us sitting on the sidelines would like, but I do think it's the correct way.
Judge O'Malley, I'm going to give you the last word on that, and I appreciate it. The three of us are going to retreat and have a nice Guinness with each other.
Okay.
I want to thank both you and Judge O'Grady for spending some time with me to talk about these very important issues that are happening right now in front of us, and that we have to stay awake, we have to be vigilant, and we have to continue to protect our judiciary.
Thank you
I'm
for
Joe
having
Tucker.
us, Joe.
Thank you. I'm Joe Tucker, President of the International Academy of Trial Lawyers, and thank you for listening to the Academy's podcast, The Rule of Law, The Academy Speaks.